Atlanta Press Club Debates 2008. The Republican race for the 12th Congressional District is brought to you from Georgia Public Broadcasting. Here is the moderator for tonight's debate.
Good evening. I'm Sonny Dixon, news anchor for the CBS affiliate WTOC-TV in Savannah. Welcome to our 2008 election campaign debates originating from the studios of GPB. The debate tonight is organized by the Atlanta Press Club. We also welcome the statewide audience of GPB's radio network, which is simulcasting this debate, and our online audience at gpb.org. Now, let's meet the Republican candidates facing each other in Georgia's 12th Congressional District primary election. They are, in alphabetical order, Ben Crystal. He is the former talk show host for News Talk 630 WBMQ in Savannah. Ray McKinney was an energy services company vice president until last year. He has worked with the Defense Department and the Department of Energy. And John Stone was the former deputy chief of staff and communications director for both the late U.S. Representative Charlie Norwood and former U.S. Representative Max Burns. Prior to entering political life, Stone was a news anchor and reporter for WBBQ News in Augusta. Those are the candidates. Here's the format for the debate tonight. In the first round, each candidate will answer one question. 1 minute will be allotted for the response. In the second round, the candidates will question one another, and then in the third round, our panelists will continue the questioning. At the end of the question and answer period, each candidate will make a 30-second closing statement. Now we want to meet our panel of prominent Georgia journalists selected by the Atlanta Press Club. First, we have Walter Jones, who is the Atlanta bureau chief for Morris News Service. And next is Erin Haynes. She is a reporter for the Associated Press. And our third panelist, Orlando Montoya, investigative reporter for GPB station WSVH in Savannah. Now we want to get started with this important debate. Now, in this round, the order of the candidates to be questioned has been randomly selected. And we begin with Walter Jones' question for John Stone.
Good evening, and thank you for participating. Probably the first thing that's on most people's minds right now is gasoline taxes. What suggestions do you have for lowering the price?
Well, Walter, thank you for the question. I think we need to do two things on gas prices. Number one, we have to have an emergency plan to help consumers in Georgia who are being absolutely bankrupted by these prices. And then we need a long-term plan to get us out of this mess and to make sure we don't get here again. To begin with, we need to roll back federal and state gas taxes along with the 54-cent a gallon tariff we're currently charging on imported ethanol for a 6-month period. That'll buy us a little relief, put some consumer confidence back in consumers again, and give a break to our economy. Second, we need to do what John Kennedy did in 1962 when he said we're going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. We need to commit to American energy independence in 10 years through whatever means are necessary to do it. We need to drill in ANWR. We need to drill offshore. We need new refineries. We need to expand nuclear power, hydrogen power, every form of alternate energy, hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles, whatever it takes, and let the Department of Energy be for us what NASA was in the 1960s.
Erin Haynes, it is now your turn to ask a question of Ray McKinney.
Yes. Well, before you sought to become the Republican candidate for the 12th District, you were running for President of the United States, which some people know. And so my question is, why should voters take you seriously now as a congressional contender?
That's a great question. See, like a lot of these voters out here, I was totally fed up with Washington and the way the whole political system works. So on April Fool's Day last year, I announced my candidacy for Vice President of the United States. Now, what I did do is I filed all the appropriate paperwork, and I did it completely legally. What happened was, though, within about 2 or 3 weeks, I was talking to thousands of people all over this country. I was invited to the Texas State straw poll, and in that straw poll, I beat 5 other candidates. One of the guys that I beat was John McCain. And that's when I was contacted by people in Washington and said, Ray, you know, we like your issues. The American people are looking for some change, and you've got some common sense ideas. Why don't you consider running for Congress? So we came back, we looked over the district, we talked to a lot of people, asked them what they thought. They thought it was a good idea, so I left my job in November, resigned my position, and now this is what I'm doing.
Orlando Montoya, your question for Ben Crystal.
On the radio, you sometimes made your points by parodying Black Voice. You are accused of calling a politician a thief. Is that the kind of language you intend to take to Washington?
Well, if you mean, will I have a sense of humor and expect others to as well, especially in the political arena, the answer is absolutely. It's not lost on me that during my career in radio, there are some individuals, almost exclusively of elected political position, who believe that they have special factors which allow them to be exempt from parody or from, in other circumstances, any criticism whatsoever. And should you, as a voice of the people, make such a parody, or in some cases question their efficacy or their quality, you are immediately labeled whatever epithet they can come up with, and the racist label is often thrown at conservatives. I am a proud conservative. I am no racist, and I find that that is a brickbat used by those who simply lack any other quality or even reasonable criticism.
That concludes round one of our questions. In the second round, the candidates will have the opportunity to ask one question of an opponent of his choice. We're going to ask that you please limit the questions to 15 seconds. 1 minute will be allowed for answers, and then the questioner has 30 seconds for rebuttal. The order of the questions has been determined by random drawing, and the candidates, please indicate to whom your question is addressed. The first question will be asked by John Stone.
Okay, I guess my question would be to Ray. And Ray, as you know, we're facing 47 million uninsured Americans today with a health care crisis. What specifically would you do to address those 47 million and try to get them some relief in Congress, knowing we'll have a narrowly divided Congress?
Well, you know, the odd thing is my wife had to get some stitches the other day, and we went to the hospital, and it cost $1,800 for 4 stitches in this finger. And there was a big sign right there on the wall that said, we will not decline coverage for anybody. So to say there's 47 million uninsured people out there, maybe they don't have the money to pay for it, but they're still getting the coverage. You know, one of the things that we've got to do is we've got to streamline the system a little bit. We've got to cut some of the fat out of it. We've got to get, you know, we got an immigration issue. We've got a lot of people that are feeding off this system. You know, to write this down into a 1-minute answer, it's a little tough.
Mr. Stone?
I think there is one specific issue that's very dear to Georgians, that is covering people who have pre-existing health conditions. And in our state, as there is in roughly half the states around the country, there's no way for those people to buy their own insurance even when they have their own money and are willing to pay. I think we can move forward with a bipartisan plan, which is very difficult to get bipartisan consensus on, but in this case we can, to provide a national high-risk pool to guarantee that if you have money to pay for your own coverage and you're willing to buy, there will be a policy available.
Ben Crystal now has the opportunity to ask a question of one of his opponents. Please identify to whom you pose the question.
Mr. Stone, you have talked in your consideration of alleviating our energy crisis, reductions in tariffs, reductions in what some call the windfall that oil companies get in an effort to improve our energy situation. Do you have a concern that a lack of an effect on supply as opposed to simply demand would do nothing more than increase demand and eliminate any price savings that the American public would enjoy?
No, and first let me clarify that a little bit. I have no problem and no issue with windfall profits. What I addressed was the fact that we're currently providing $17 billion a year in subsidies to the oil companies that are making world record profits, and that we take those profits and use them to pay for that tax break on the gas moratorium so that it has no impact on the Highway Trust Fund and doesn't take it away from our highway construction projects. I think we need to address all the problems in a comprehensive bipartisan energy plan, and I think we can do that if we take the same approach that President Kennedy did in 1962. We've got to address everything out there, supply, demand. I think the reason we're having the problems we are today is not a problem of supply and demand. It's a problem of the fact that we have not expanded our ability to produce energy within our own country by the fact that Democrats have voted to block drilling offshore, drilling in ANWR, and new refineries for 15 years. We have to address that. That'll solve the problem.
Mr. Crystal.
We've certainly seen the incumbent side with the special interest left-wing environmental lobbyists in blocking every effort to improve our own energy independence, and that is certainly a matter of fact. But the bottom line is the Soviet Union tried government control of prices for 70 years. It never works. Government involvement in price controls always increases demand without any effect on supply. You find yourself in actually a more significantly dangerous situation economically for the people of the 12th and America.
Ray McKinney, you get to ask the last question in this round.
All right, thanks. John, one of the things that you just mentioned was the tax subsidies that the oil companies get. Now, given the fact that the oil companies last year paid $138 billion in federal income taxes, you're going to take away the tax, the road tax, to save us money, but you're going to take away their tax subsidy. Now, the question I have for you is, where do the oil companies get the money to pay these extra taxes?
Number one, they're not paying extra taxes. What we're doing is taking away the special tax cuts that the oil industry receives. I think right now we have our Georgia consumers that are in a lot more dire need of having a tax break than are the oil companies making world record profits. If we have to choose, we have to choose for the consumers first. I think that's one problem we've had as a party, is we've stood up too much for corporate interest and not enough for the average working guy who needs a break. If we're going to give a tax break, let's give it to people making $12 an hour instead of the oil companies making hundreds of billions of dollars a year, the greatest profits in the history of recorded economics in the world. I think we have to stand up for working people. And I don't mind any profits that the oil companies make as long as it's not breaking the back of Georgia consumers. And right now it is. We have to make a choice. We have to show people we're a different party from what we've been in the past, and we have to stand up against the special interests now.
Mr. McKinney.
Well, you know, the way, if you look at some of the numbers, the federal government is making more in profit than the oil companies are. And if you were to take away my home interest deduction or my subsidy, that's money coming out of my pocket. So if we're going to take away a subsidy for the oil companies, in other words, a tax break, and especially somebody who's in support of the fair tax, which takes away all the tax breaks, that money's got to come from somewhere. And that money, the taxes that they paid, that $138 billion they paid last year, came from us, the consumers. If the government was not taking as much money from the oil companies as they are now, prices could come down.
Thank you very much. That concludes our second round of questioning. For our third round, we return to our panel of journalists, and from this point until the closing statements, the panelists will ask questions of the candidate of his or her choice. The candidates have 1 minute to respond, and again, as the moderator, I will determine if the opposing candidates will be given 30 seconds for a rebuttal. We begin this round of questions with a question posed by Walter Jones from the Morris News Service.
Mr. McKinney, in the questionnaire for the Vote Smart project, you said that you would be interested in significantly decreasing funding for medical research. Considering that the Medical College of Georgia would be essentially a constituent of the 12th District, how do you square those two, or your position in that regard?
Government spending. You know, if you look at the Constitution of the United States and look what the duties of Congress are, I don't believe it's Congress's duty or the federal government's duty to solve our problems. Take things like medical research. The private industry spends a lot of money doing that right now. I don't think that there were any federal funds used in the research of Viagra, but yet the industry did it. Where there's a supply, where there's a demand, there's a supply. Take No Child Left Behind. Here we have the federal government telling us at our local level how we're supposed to run our schools, how we're supposed to educate our children. I am a conservative person. I believe in less government. I think that the desire out there is for the medical research. The demand is out there. The money's out there, but it doesn't need to be coming from taxpayer dollars. If the government was taking less taxpayer dollars, there would be more funds available for things like medical research.
Aaron Haynes, your question.
My question is to Mr. Stone. Considering that you haven't lived in Georgia for about 10 years, although I know you have a house in Augusta that you have and were renting, why do you believe that you are the candidate best suited to serve the 12th District, and why should voters believe that you are aware and in touch with their issues?
Well, number one, the 10 years that you mentioned, 13 years actually, that I've been gone from Georgia. I've been working on the staff of Congressman Charlie Norwood, briefly with Congressman Burns, and fighting hard to help serve the counties of this district and many other counties in Georgia. There's a lot of uncompleted work on the table, a lot of things that haven't been done for our district. To tell you the truth, I was ready to come back to Georgia and be done with politics, but I didn't see where things were going to get done for this district that's been sorely overlooked over many, many years. We have a lot of economic infrastructure projects that we aren't done with, that we need somebody to stand up and be in the bully pulpit for and fight for this district. And I didn't see anybody in this race that I felt like we could get behind and push for that. And I didn't want to see the progress undone that we had made in so many areas, such as health care, such as highways, transportation, saving Fort Gordon and Fort Stewart from the BRAC list. And I didn't want to see those things get away from us.
Orlando Montoya.
Mr. Crystal, there has been some talk of perhaps another stimulus payment coming to get the economy moving. Is that something that the U.S. taxpayers need, or should we just tough through this and try to get to the other side?
Well, I appreciate the question, Orlando, and it reminds me of those heady days back in the early 90s where the grand patriarch of the incumbents party, none other than Bill Clinton, used to tell us that they would give us a tax cut, but they just don't feel like they can trust the American public to spend it right. The American public is always better suited to determine what should be done with their money than a federal government which in almost every circumstance can prove that failure can be achieved under any circumstances. The idea that someone would suggest that handing taxpayer money back to the taxpayers in the form of a stimulus payment would be bad economics, well, two things are probably true. One, they're probably the incumbent. And two, they probably don't have much respect for the American taxpayer. I trust the American taxpayer. I trust the people of the 12th District to make the right decisions about the money that they have and the money they spend, not some guy in a suit and somewhere in Washington, D.C. who's never coming here, never going to meet them, and doesn't care.
Walter Jones, your question.
Thank you. The war in Iraq is a huge issue right now, and people want to know, will it go on forever? And Mr. Stone, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Walter. We have to win. We have to win in Iraq. We have to win in Afghanistan. I think there's nobody out there better than our military leaders and our military community that knows exactly what we need to do to win. We need to get the politicians out of the decision-making on how to conduct the war. We need to provide our troops with the support they need. We need to provide our military leaders with the authority to do what it takes to win those wars, win them finally, turn them over to a democratic country, and finally be able to bring our folks home. We have to win. We can't have started what we've started in the Middle East and walk away and leave the kind of mess that we left in Southeast Asia. One of the things we need to do, and specifically in our district, is provide better medical care for the folks that are coming back from over there. We need to go back to the party policies of Ronald Reagan on the 6-month family deployment plan and take some of the burden off our military families and provide them the support they need to get the job done, both there and back here with their families.
Aaron Haynes, your opportunity to ask a question.
This question is for Mr. Crystal. You know, you don't exactly have a reputation for playing nice with Democrats and liberals, as a lot of listeners in the 12th District probably witnessed as during your tenure down there as a talk show radio host. So if you are elected in the fall, and if the Democrats were to maintain control of Congress, would you be able to work across the aisle?
Well, first let me say I am nothing but a harmless little puppy. I am Mr. Friendly. But that aside, the truth of the matter is that a member of Congress has not just an obligation to go to Washington and work with any and all with whom work can be done for the betterment of his district and this nation. And whether that means you work across the aisle or you work within your own party, your job, and I've been asked this question, well, what are you going to do? Go up there and represent the conservatives. Well, if you're a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, you are a representative of your district. I won't just represent the conservatives of the 12th, the Republican voters of the 12th. I will be the employee and representative of every taxpaying, voting citizen of the 12th District. That means the Democrats, too, who are no less deserving of a quality representative who hears and is one of them than anybody else in the district. Republican, Democrat, they will all be my fellow taxpayers, and I will do the job for all of them.
Orlando Montoya.
Mr. Stowe, there seems to be just two polar opposite diametrical sides to the illegal immigration problem, from arrest them and throw them all out to give them all citizenship. Is there a middle path?
Well, number one, I don't accept that as far as the scenario. I think those are straw man arguments in terms of mass deportation or giving them all citizenship. I think what we need to do, we got into this problem over a period of 20 years from both Republican and Democratic administrations refusing to enforce the law. We can't get out of it overnight either, but what we can do is, number one, secure our borders. That comes first before anything else. There's no point trying to have any type of immigration reform policy unless we stop the leak. We need to secure the border with the deployment of 50,000 troops on our southern border and on our northern border combined. Secondly, we need to start enforcing workplace law and making sure that our benefit packages, state and federal benefits, don't go to illegal immigrants. If we do that consistently and vigorously over a period of several years, we'll see the problem gradually correct itself until it becomes more manageable. At that point, we can sit down and determine what do we need to do long terms in terms of a guest worker program. But until we do those things, we won't be able to have that discussion.
Walter Jones, your next question.
I'm interested, Mr. Crystal, about your views on drilling off of the coast of Georgia. Are you for that, or would you consider that off limits?
I absolutely support it. I am proud to say that I support the exploitation of domestic resources so that we can wrest control of our energy policy and our energy future from foreign oil interests, which have been very well served by the incumbent and his fellow denizens on the left, who have done everything they can to block energy independence for the United States of America. Every vote, every time, whether it be off the coast of Georgia, whether it be in the Gulf of Mexico, whether it be in ANWR, whether it be the oil shale out west, every time they are given an opportunity to allow us to seek energy independence, it is the incumbent and his party who stand up for the Middle Eastern oil interests and say, no, we will do their bidding. Some of the money that we spend over there ends up in the pockets of people who are out loud saying, we will, when we get the chance, do you harm. It's not just a matter of energy independence, it's a matter of national security. The incumbent, after 4 years, he hasn't failed, he has done nothing. Now is the time to wrest that control away and build not just a better economic day, but a brighter day for all of us.
Aaron Haynes with AP.
Well, then I guess to your point then, Mr. Crystal, how do you balance our need for energy and protecting the environment here, protecting the coast?
Well, the assumption would be that the environment would in some day be heavily endangered were we to exploit domestic resources. The truth of the matter is that, for example, in ANWR, the arguments that it would be destroyed, that this pristine wilderness would be somehow despoiled if we were to drill there, actually are dramatically overblown and in some cases patently false. That remains true for the coastal regions of Georgia. Now, I won't comment on, say, wind farms off the coast of a prominent Democrat's home because, of course, it would spoil his sight lines, and it won't happen. That's the kind of hypocrisy that we need to avoid. The environmental left doesn't really care about the damage to the environment that exploitation of domestic resources, whether they be off Georgia's coast or elsewhere, would cause. They just want to stop it from happening. And the truth is that environmental despoliation, to coin a phrase, is a very much exaggerated argument made by fearmongers who want nothing more than to continue their vice grip on your economic independence here in the 12th.
Last question in this round will be asked by Orlando Montoya.
Mr. McKinney, public agencies at all levels seem to be cash-strapped to pay for improvements to roads, bridges. The Minnesota collapse illustrated that, airports, public transit. How do you propose to deal with the unmet infrastructure needs of our country?
Right now, the entire country's cash-strapped. We're cash-strapped. The United States government right now, I believe at the end of this year, we're expected to be in debt by $10 trillion. Basically, I'm wondering how much of this country we still own. A comprehensive tax reform could do a major part of that. Right now, we have over $17 trillion in U.S. assets held overseas. If we had a tax plan or tax program back here in the United States like the fair tax, H.R. 25, or something along the lines of a flat tax or something that would give business an incentive, and we had politicians who quit talk about taking away tax subsidies and raising tax burdens, we might be able to get that $17 trillion back here in the United States in this economy. Next thing we could do, everybody's talking about here about energy. It's odd. I'm the one that's got 23 years experience in energy. This right here is the perfect fuel source right here for the United States. All we need is cheap electricity. In high school, we were all converting this into hydrogen and oxygen. We could become the world's leader in clean energy. We can export the energy, we'd export the technology, we'd export the materials.
Well, the time for questions has expired. It is now time for the closing statements in Georgia's Republican primary for the 12th Congressional District. Each candidate in this debate will have 30 seconds for a closing statement, and the order was randomly chosen before the broadcast. The first statement will come from Ben Crystal.
Well, thank you, Sonny, and thank you, all of my fellow taxpaying citizens of Georgia's 12th. It has been a pleasure to be with you tonight. 28 years ago, Ronald Reagan asked us the question, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? He knew the answer when he asked the question, just as we know it now. Whether it be our parents begging for school choice to give their children a chance in an education system that has failed, our heavy industry workers at the ports looking at diesel prices that are skyrocketing out of control. We have an opportunity to wreak real magic in the 12th District. We must take it back from Washington, relight the torch of liberty so that we can bask in its glow again.
Next, John Stone will make his closing statement.
We have a sitting congressman who sold us out on gas prices, illegal immigration, taxes, and the infrastructure of our district. we must win our seat back this November. We must win also back our Republican Party from those who hijacked the Republican Revolution and have been selling out our country and spending like Democrats. But most important, we must win our nation back to the principles of God and country that we have abandoned if we are to be successful. With your vote, I'll strive to do all of that in November. God bless each of you. Thank you for watching, and good night.
And the final closing statement will come from Ray McKinney.
Well, 2 years ago, Nancy Pelosi and Hillary Clinton said put the Democrats in control of the Congress and you won't see $3 a gallon gas again. And they were right. Right now it's $4 a gallon. I think it's time for a little common sense. You know, I grew up in this district. I've been in independent businesses for 23 years, had a private business myself. And I think we need somebody in Washington who can just take back a little bit of common sense values and try to bring this country back to common sense.
That concludes our debate. Our thanks to the candidates and to our fine panel of journalists. We would also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging the debate. For more information about the Atlanta Press Club, you may visit www.atlantapressclub.org. The debates that air on Georgia Public Broadcasting will be archived on the Press Club's website. I'm Sonny Dixon. Thank you for joining us for this primary election debate.
This program was funded in part by a grant from the late Tom Watson Brown and by supporters of Georgia Public Broadcasting. Thank you.